I really honestly did not want to move forward with prosecuting my attacker because I didn't have faith in the system, and I felt that it was simpler and honestly safer to just not say anything.
In the wake of new details emerging in the Vanessa Guillen case, various service members and veterans have come forward to share their own stories of sexual trauma, sexual assault, and rape, being spurred by the fact that Vanessa Guillen herself purportedly faced similar issues, but was unable to share it with her chain of command, feeling very much that the military system would fail her. Using the hashtag I am Vanessa Guillen, service members and veterans have taken to Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook to really share their stories, many of them for the first time. So we talked to a number of women, all of them veterans, who had experienced a sexual trauma and who felt comfortable enough to be vocal about it.
What happened to me is a violent sexual assault by a group of men.
I arrived in Germany. I was very fortunate to be stationed in Germany. I was able to travel, but within 2 months of arriving there, I was raped by another fellow soldier. And after it happened, I did not feel comfortable even calling my own chain of command to come pick me up.
I was assaulted in 2010. I was in the first sort of group of women on board, and it was rough.
After I was attacked and raped, I called the only person that I knew at the time, who happened to be a cop in the Air Force. He was also an enlisted soldier, and because law enforcement are mandatory reporters, he reported it. I felt like my power was already taken because I was forced to make an unrestricted report and move forward with my case, when I don't think that's what I would have done in the first place. I think I would have utilized the restricted reporting, received healthcare without having to prosecute my attacker. And so I just felt like my power was taken. And because of the culture of the Army itself, I really did not feel comfortable coming forward to my chain of command. I really honestly did not want to move forward with prosecuting my attacker because I didn't have faith in the system. And I felt that it was simpler and honestly safer to just not say anything. And after it happened, when I did, everything kind of settled and I went back to work, I remember even telling 2 of my supervisors, both NCOs, and I told them what happened to me. And I said I was taken advantage of by another soldier. And the first question that I was asked was I drinking? How much were you drinking? And what were you wearing? So from the start, it was handled very unfairly, and I was already discredited. I really just thought, why am I giving my all and working towards a job in a system that does not care about me? So I didn't have faith in the system. I didn't have faith that I would seek justice. I honestly was very uncomfortable with the culture regarding rape.
One of the women I spoke to was Paula Coughlin. She was a Navy veteran who served in the 1990s. She is the whistleblower for the Tailhook case, which has been cited time and again as one of the sticking points for very early on in dealing with sexual misconduct in the military and the processes that need to be reformed or changed altogether. Her response to this was essentially that this should not still be happening 30 years after she brought her case forward.
I always said I went through flight school and in my military career, spending a lot of time educating men on that I was as capable and as deserving. But I also had to educate them on what's a proper and what's an improper comment, and what's appropriate to say to a woman that you're working with, because there's just a command climate that a culture that dictated kind of a boys' club, and anything went. If sometimes people don't understand that there's a really unhealthy dynamic in a command that tolerates sexual harassment, and there's still a huge contingent of military that don't understand how it's detrimental. It's just some smoking and joking. I didn't mean any harm by it. She's a hot piece of ass. Whatever that person says and however they make some kind of excuse for how that behavior has been accepted, the commanding officer has an obligation to shut that down. The criminal justice system in the military, known as the UCMJ, absolutely is archaic. And if I could walk you through a couple of steps here. You have a young woman in a command who's being harassed by someone either in her command. Quite often, harassment in the command is done by someone superior. So there's a power differential there that's a problem. But then you've got a command that allows sexual harassment or which escalates to sexual assault. Statistics show that is the dynamic there. Whoever does file a complaint has to go back to that same command that has laid the groundwork of a toxic environment for a victim. And that command is going to decide whether to move forward with an investigation. That command is going to decide ultimately whether there was a crime committed and whether they should prosecute. And if they do prosecute, that command gets to choose how and what they serve as judge and jury. So it's all enclosed in this nasty little cycle. Right now, a service member doesn't really have the option. They don't believe they have the option of calling the police and reporting someone who sexually assaulted them. But a civilian understands that's their recourse. A military person has been trained to only go through the chain of command, even if that chain of command is ultimately going to decide they're a liar and process them out with personality disorder. That is the dynamic that we are trying to stop. And it wasn't stopped for Vanessa. It wasn't stopped. It wasn't stopped for me. It wasn't stopped for 500,000 members that have gotten out of the Navy or the Marine Corps or the Army or the Air Force because their command did not care. 75% of the men and women that come forward with a complaint of sexual assault are out of the military in 9 months. So how can that be serving the good order and discipline? And how can that in any way be bolstering our readiness, is to lose that many people? It's ridiculous. We can just hope that the current legislative process right now in Congress and in the Senate, a bipartisan support to change and update our military justice system, will prevail. And that's really the best thing we can hope for, is to change the dynamic and start prosecuting these rapists, murderers. You know, this is a serious issue. Who wants to send their kids off to join the military if this is what they face? Not me.
Jenny Brett is another such veteran. She experienced a pretty horrific incident. She did not come forward. She felt very strongly that community is the answer to a lot of the issues faced by those who've been sexually assaulted in the military.
I think it's so important that women who are in the military and women veterans are able to find a sense of community, because when we do get together and talk to each other, we find that we share a lot of the same experiences. When in a lot of cases, while we were experiencing those things, we felt alone and we felt like we were the only one, and we felt like there was no one there to talk to or to share those experiences with. And so I feel like the I Am Vanessa Guillen hashtag has really created another opportunity for community. And I think that's the most important thing for any person who is experiencing trauma, be it sexual harassment or sexual violence.
Regarding the hashtag I Am Vanessa Guillen, I think that Twitter really gave us, and social media really gave us an outlet. Seeing all of these cases and seeing a bunch of other women, really, I felt like it was my time, and I think it's really now or never. We see what happened to Vanessa. We see the inconsistencies in the system. We see the lack of accountability.
I think that our social media is allowing people to come forward in a way that they couldn't before. And that brings up a really important point, that victims of sexual assault and sexual harassment in the military, obviously from Vanessa's case and from most persons who have tried to complain about the sexual harassment climate in a command, are shut down. They have no voice. So to have a platform, and in the context of the media exploring and revealing the horrors of Vanessa's murder and all of the harassment and threatening probably behavior that came before her death, I think that has opened a window. It has struck a chord with military members. It has struck a chord with the American public. And now some of these women and men have the opportunity to say, they have a voice.
It's very difficult for women to find a community within the military. The culture that exists in the military is very patriarchal. It's very masculinized. It's intentionally that way. It's made that way. So women generally feel excluded, and we feel like we have to sort of, in a lot of cases, sort of defeminize ourselves and put that part of ourselves aside in order to adapt to this boys' club that we've been told our whole lives or our whole careers that we're, joining. So we tend to not form a community of support among ourselves, and we don't have that support. That leads to accepting things from men that we may not realize are not normal. This community that's been created as a result of this horrific event has really created a community among women and among men who've experienced trauma that just didn't exist before within military and veteran circles.
I think that Twitter and even Instagram are both giving soldiers like me an outlet to come forward. And even with coming out with my attack, I want to point out too that I have had 5 to 10 soldiers in my private messages coming forward to me that I've served with, telling me that they are still uncomfortable with coming forward. There is still not a space for them to come forward. And I want to point out what we see online isn't even the full story of it either, because there are people who are still uncomfortable with coming forward with their stories. So I am just really trying to speak out for those who cannot. It's truly heartbreaking, an institution that we sign up for to serve our country and die overseas for our country, but we can't even be treated with dignity and respect by our own fellow soldiers.